Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are doing a response video. This is in response to Movie Review Time. That's right, Rob over at Movie Review Time. If you guys haven't checked out his channel, please do so. He's an awesome YouTuber with great knowledge of the horror genre and of film in general, not just the horror genre. He's just got all kinds of great stuff. He's very witty, very funny, and very knowledgeable. So Rob did a video where he listed his favorite part 2s of horror. So I thought that was really cool, because to me there's so many great part 2s in horror. Some of my favorite horror films are actually part 2s. Once you get into the third film in a franchise, that's something different, but there are a lot of great part 2s. So I'm going to start off by saying a couple honorable mentions, and that is a couple movies that I don't actually have in my collection, but I wish I did, and I'm working on it. I'm just constantly working on trying to build up my collection, but I got a long way to go. So the first honorable mention will be Phantasm 2, The Ball is Back. An excellent sequel, so much fun, a lot more action this time around with Reggie Bannister and the Tall Man. Yeah, I really need to get that. And next up would be Amityville 2, The Possession, which I actually prefer over the original. I found the original to be very slow-paced and boring, and there's really not a lot happening, and we don't get to see much. Well, we do get to see a lot of cool stuff in Amityville 2, The Possession. And I like the fact that they focus on the actual events of what happened in the Amityville horror house. And that's the fact from Ronald DeFeo, who killed his entire family in that house with a shotgun, and then claimed that the voices in the house told him to do it, So I found that really interesting, and it's handled very well in the movie. Of course, until it becomes like an Exorcist knockoff, then it kind of gets a little ridiculous, but alright, now let's get to it, shall we? The first one will be Puppet Master 2, which I have as part of this great 9-movie collection here. Now, what I love about the Puppet Master movies is the puppets themselves, of course. Like, I don't really care about any of the other characters in the movies. I don't care about the human characters. I just want to see the puppets do their thing, because I just think they're so awesome. I love the character design, and I love the animation, and yeah, I just want to see them do their thing. It's so funny, and so much fun. Next up is going to be Jeepers Creepers 2. I know that Rob was not a fan of this film, but I did enjoy it, especially the creature himself, the Creeper. I think it's such a great character design, and he did a lot of cool stuff in this movie. Like at one point, his head gets messed up, and he just takes it off and puts one of his victims' heads on his body, and then it turns into the creature's head again, It's like, he's got some pretty sick powers, this guy. He's really tough. Next up, Hostel 2. Of course, from Eli Roth. I think it's a really good follow-up to the original. I still like the original better, but I think it was done very well, and I like the fact that they switched it around kind of, where in this movie the females were the bad guys and, preying on the men. So I thought that was very interesting, and this movie is just brutal with the with the gore effects and the torture scenes. Yeah, really intense stuff. Next up is The Conjuring 2, which I only just saw a couple weeks ago. When I got this DVD at a local Savers store. And it's in fantastic condition, actually. I really think this is an excellent follow-up. I wish it didn't have as much CGI effects as it does, but that being said, it's got incredible atmosphere. And I love a lot of the camera work where some of the scenes are very sweeping and epic, and with the camera, and you can't tell at times whether it's computer effects or real camera work at times, and it's like seamless. So that's one thing I love about it. Next up is going to be one I just picked up, and that is Sleepaway Camp 2, Unhappy Campers. I just think that's like the greatest title ever. And this is such a fun sequel. One of the most fun slasher movies you'll ever see. Yes, it is very self-aware. This film knows what it is. It's a campy slasher movie, you know. But I love Pamela Springsteen taking over the role of Angela Baker from the first film. And this is a lot different Angela. This is a very bubbly, outgoing Angela. And I love the fact that she's taken out the bad campers, the people that do bad things, and she's punishing them, you know. I love that, and it works so well. Next up is Saw 2, which is probably the only movie on this list that I actually enjoy more than the original. Because in this film you get to see Jigsaw, as played very well by Tobin Bell throughout the franchise, of course. And you see more of him in this than any of the other movies, and you really get to know his character. And that's what I love about Saw 2. Plus you have Donnie Wahlberg in the role of Detective Matthews, who does a fantastic job, and he's a great adversary to Jigsaw. That's what I love about Saw 2. Next up is another one that Rob didn't care too much for, and that is Scream 2. I think Scream 2 is an excellent follow-up. I think it's so well done. And again, you have most of the cast from the original returning. You know, of course, the ones that survived. You got Courtney Cox, David Arquette. You got the guy that played Randy there. I forget his name. And Neve Campbell, of course, returning to her role as Sidney Prescott. Just excellent performances all the way around. Excellent direction by Wes Craven, who directed all the films in the Scream franchise. And it's very witty. It's got some great horror. And it's just excellent. I think it's a fantastic follow-up. Next up is Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. That's a no-brainer. I mean, once you get past Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, that's when the series goes downhill, you know. I mean, I do enjoy the third one, Hell on Earth, but it's no way near the quality of the first two films. Now, this is a fantastic follow-up. I love, there's so many great scenes with the Cenobites, and Pinhead has some of his greatest lines ever. I think I prefer the scenes with the Cenobites in this movie even more than the original. You get to see a little bit more of them, and you see them in their environment, in their home, in hell, basically, as part of the Leviathan Lament configuration. I just think it's such a great sequel, and of course you got Kirsty Cotton returning, as played so well by Ashley Lawrence. Once again, she's the final girl of this film, and she's just amazing. One of the best final girls in horror, and I love the direction in this film as well. Clive Barker didn't direct this one, but the director of this film did a great job following up. Also, you did get Julia returning to the film, as played so well by Claire Higgins, and she really plays a major part in this film. She's basically the main villain, and she just does a fantastic job. Just an awesome film, and the gore is just unbelievable, off the charts. And of course you have Child's Play 2. Sorry, Jack, Chucky's back. I just have to say that anytime I talk about Child's Play 2. I think this is one of my favorite horror posters of all time. I just think that's so cool. I love that. Chucky taking out the Jack in the Box. I love it. Just an excellent follow-up, a fantastic sequel. This is what everything a sequel should be, you know. You ramp up the action, you see more of Chucky. Chucky has some of his best one-liners. Chucky is just completely unhinged in this movie. They just let loose with Chucky in this film, and the movie is so well because of it. You know, such a great performance by Brad Dourif as the voice of Chucky once again, and I'd say this has the best version of Chucky in the franchise, for sure. Evil Dead 2, of course you gotta put that in there. Now, whether it's an actual sequel is kind of debatable, because it is kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Why would he go back to that cabin in the woods, you know, after all the events of the original? Now, some people say that, you know, the Evil Dead 2 officially begins where Bruce Campbell's character Ash gets possessed by the Evil Dead. That's kind of when part 2 begins, and the first one, the first 20 minutes or so is kind of a recap of the original, but they couldn't show footage of the original because they didn't have rights. Which kind of makes sense, but it seems kind of silly when you watch it, though, that you don't really get that feeling. But regardless, Evil Dead 2 is an absolutely phenomenal movie. It's got a lot more humor than the original, I would say. But let me tell you, it's just batshit crazy and over the top. Way more over the top than the original, with just gore everywhere in your face. Like, that's what this movie is. It's in your face. Like, it's just amazing. And the abuse that Bruce Campbell takes in this movie is amazing. I don't know how he did it. Just amazing. The stunt work, too. I love the scenes where his hand gets possessed, and then he cuts his hand off, and then the hand strangles him, and the hand smashes plates over his head and flips him over and beats him up. Just amazing. Just an incredible performance by Bruce Campbell. Next up, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. Hell yeah. Now, I have loved this film since day one, since the first time I saw it as a kid. And I saw it pretty much right after I saw the original film. And to me, it always felt like a great, true sequel to the original. I know some people don't feel that way, but some people don't like the fact that it injects a lot more humor in the sequel. But there's plenty of horror in this film. There's some sick, sadistic stuff in this movie. Yeah, it is more like a black comedy, but it's a really sadistic black comedy. And of course, I love the character of Chop Top as played by Bill Moseley. One of the best characters in the entire franchise. I love Dennis Hopper's batshit crazy, over-the-top performance. And that's what this movie is. It's very over-the-top. It's totally different from the original in that sense, as it's over the top with gore everywhere, where the original was very subdued. It didn't have a lot of gore, it didn't have a lot of blood, and it didn't have a lot of humor. It was very serious, very intense horror film. But this one is different, and I like that. Why do the same movie over again? You know, do something different, and it worked so well. And plus, you have Jim Seedal coming back as the cook, which is a very welcome return. And I really love the Stretch character as played by Caroline Williams. I love all the characters in this movie. It's just a fantastic movie. Next up is a movie that's very unfairly maligned, in my opinion, and that is Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge. Now, I know it's not a perfect film by any means, but there's a lot of great stuff in here. It's very scary. You got that amazing opening dream sequence on the bus there with Freddy. Just awesome. I love that. It's got some great atmosphere. It's very dark. And, of course, Robert Englund has one of his best performances in the entire franchise. I love the look of Freddy. Freddy is very, very scary in this film, very dark. And he also has some of his best lines, his best one-liners. You've got the body, and I've got the brains. Ha ha. Unforgettable. Oh, he's got, you're all my children now. Tell me that scene isn't amazing when the kids are having the barbecue and the pool party in the back, and he comes out of the ground and slashes everybody. That scene is just awesome. Yeah, there are a couple cringeworthy scenes that I wish they left out of the film, but like Jesse dancing around in his room, that makes me cringe. Yeah, there are some scenes that I wish were left on the cutting room floor, but overall I really enjoy Freddy's Revenge. Next up is Psycho 2, which I have as part of this excellent 3-pack, which I love all these movies. I love all the Psycho films, but certainly Psycho 2 has to be the best of the bunch. Yeah, it's not as good. Of course, it's not going to be as good as the original, I mean. But this is an excellent follow-up. And I will say, dare I say, that Psycho 2 has better suspense than the original. I will say that. And you have another amazing performance by Anthony Perkins. And I love that you got Vera Miles returning, who played Marion Crane's sister in the original film. And she's back in this film, and she does a fantastic job, you know, trying to do everything in her power to make sure that Norman Bates is not released from prison, which he actually is. And they do everything in their power to try and drive him nuts, you know. And there are murders starting to happen around town, and everyone wonders, did Norman do it, you know, because he's back, he's out of jail now. It's got to be Norman, right? The film does such a great job of keeping you guessing at every turn, and there are a lot of nice twists and turns, and you got a great performance by Meg Tilly as well. Next up, we are getting to the nitty-gritty, baby, and this film is just a masterpiece, in my opinion. This is how you do a sequel. Friday the 13th Part 2 is absolutely fantastic. It's still got all the thrills and chills and scares of the original, but it furthers the story along by putting the focus on the Jason character from the original, at which we only kind of just heard about in the original through the mother, Pamela Voorhees. And of course you did get that classic jump scare when he came out of the Crystal Lake at the end. But I love the lore of it. I love how it pays homage to the original, how it follows up the original and furthers the story along, and yet you have even more amped up action, even more kills, and it's still got the tension and the suspense. It's just a fantastic movie, just an amazing follow-up. And I myself, I love the baghead Jason look, you know, and just an awesome film. It's got one of the greatest final acts in horror history. It's got one of the greatest final girls in Ginny, as played wonderfully by Amy Steele. Just a fantastic movie. And of course, you knew this was going to happen. Halloween 2. My favorite Part 2 in horror ever. And just what I feel is the best sequel in horror, period. Now, I've said so much about this film on my channel already. I'm just going to say that it's an absolutely phenomenal sequel, that I love every minute of it. I love all the performances, Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, Charles Cyphers, everybody that returns from the original, including all the new characters like Jimmy and Nurse Karen, Nurse Jill, and all them. So guys, thank you for joining me in my favorite Part 2s of horror. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.